Welcome to the Clearly Christian Podcast with Dr. Cy Smith. It's time to know more so you can say no more. It's time for the Clearly Christian Podcast. Here's your host, Dr. Cy Smith.
I'm Dr. Cy Smith, and this is Clearly Christian, a podcast about what it means to see the world from God's perspective and the impact this has on training the next generation to live a life consistent with a biblical worldview. If you've been listening and you like what you hear, I hope you'll hit the subscribe button or leave a review. That'll let others know the show's worth checking out, help spread the word, and serve our mission to make a difference. So thank you again for being here, and thank you for helping us spread the word. Well, today's extra credit version of the Clearly Christian Podcast is a deeper dive into the chalkboard points from our recent conversation with Dr. McCurry. He's the Provost at Randall University in Moore, Oklahoma. We talked about mission drift and what we can do as leaders to prevent mission drift and why it matters so much in a culture that is desperate for truth. So now for some further thoughts and questions, let's bring in our producer, Brian Lefelock. And Brian, what'd you think of the show?
I was really interested in it, especially coming from a parent, knowing how things are changing in the world and how people seem like they're kind of making shortcuts just to kind of get things done. I mean, things are changing fast, and it was interesting to hear Dr. McCurry talk about the shortcuts he's just not willing to accept. I know you're a lot like that as well. So I'm interested then, since I was a part of that main show, but can you reset the idea of mission drift? Like, what is mission drift and why is it a problem?
Yeah, I think examples are certainly the best case scenario in terms of an easy explanation by what we mean by mission drift, and that is schools, organizations, even companies. They don't have to be Christian to have mission drift, but these are, again, any organization, company, school, whatever. It can be a church even for that matter, but a company even like your own, where you founded your company to go a certain direction. You said, this is our mission. I want to do this. We're committed to this. And then for a host of variables years down the road, you don't find yourself there anymore. And you say, how did we get to this point? You know, and why are we so off and we're not serving the same customer anymore? Or I've lost my passion, or I'm not getting the same teachers we used to have. Or, you know, again, my company, my organization, my school, my business, it just doesn't look like it used to look. And you find yourself literally drifted off into another area. And of course, the most common or famous examples are things like the YMCA, which, you know, Young Men's Christian Association, far from where their founding principles were. Most of the Ivy League colleges that still have these fantastic mission statements about serving God and training pastors. And they're so far from that right now, yet they still have the Latin verses and inscriptions and things like that on their mottos and things like that, because they were founded to take their students in one direction, but they couldn't be further from that today. And you'll see that just all over the country. But like I said, it can even happen in a what we would call a secular organization, where you built this company up to go one direction. And like I said, decades later, you find yourself. And I tell you where it really happens a lot is in generational change, where the owners that started the company are now retired and they're, you know, maybe even passed away. The next generation usually protects what those founders put in place. But then by the third generation, that's usually when mission drift happens the most, because they're too far removed from that original mission. And if the other generations don't protect it well and keep them moving in that direction, then that usually fades and they find themselves drifting away.
So these organizations, these even schools, they can be successful. Enrollment can go up and they can make more money and they can do all these amazing things. But if it's not on mission, then you're saying that someday you're going to kind of pay the piper.
Yeah, your identity has changed. That's exactly right. And at some point, the customer will notice, and they will say, you know what, that's not what I want anymore. That's not what I signed up for. You're not who you used to be. I wanted this, and now you're that, and I'm no longer going to be a part of that. And if you get too many people saying that, then yeah, you'll end up closing your doors.
So you've talked before about the business of running a Christian school or a nonprofit, and we know we have numbers to hit, and we know we have expectations and all these things that we have to do. And yet, you know, Dr. McCurry said that 4% of young people today have a biblical worldview. And so you're fishing in a smaller pool, right, Dr. Smith?
Yeah.
Have you ever been tempted, or how do you stay away from mission drift when it seems like it just might be easier to take some shortcuts and let more kids in?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I remember being there. Oh boy, it was probably either right before the recession or after the recession, around those, 8, 9, 10, 11 years. I think a lot of schools were, because we saw our people leaving us in droves. And I know here in our community, a local General Motors plant left, and, we had 2,000, citizens just walked right out of, the Mansfield, Richland County economy. And a lot of those were MCS parents and other, parents at other schools. And so, yeah, you're exactly right. And that economic factor is big. And so we really struggled with, when you look at survival in those times, and all of a sudden your 600-700 students plummets down to 400, and you have to really reinvent the business side of your organization. Should we then change our mission to reach a different audience and fill seats? And boy, just about everybody has been there. And for us, we're a discipleship school, which means at least one parent needs to know the Lord. So in other words, that child is coming from a Christian home. At least that's the hope, if at least one parent knows the Lord. Got to go to church as well, be involved in a Bible-believing church. And then we'll be an extension of the church and home, and you can be a part of MCS. And preferably the child knows the Lord too, especially if they're old enough to have accepted Christ. But then we toyed with at that time, boy, should we relax those admission standards and go after a different customer? Go after someone who really isn't a believer or doesn't come from a Christian home, and then we'll try to convert them to Christianity, or we'll try to, hope that they will become a believer. But we needed to fill the seats, and so we'll change our mission, which sounds, grand in some sense. Oh, we'll lead these kids to Christ, and so it sounds so good. We prayed through that, and it just never felt like, the Lord was not impressing that upon us, that we needed to change who we were, because we knew that's not who we started in the 60s to be. And we thought, boy, if we're going to turn Mansfield Christian upside down for the sake of that, that better be worth it, because we're going to really change, 30, 40 years of our identity for the sake of filling seats. And we just weren't willing to go there. We just said, Lord, you know our situation. We do not feel like it's your will for us to change our mission. So we're going to stay mission true, and we're just going to get better at doing what we are called to do. So we set out in a crazy time right after the recession to say, all right, how can we make it better with less? And how do we make our product better? How do we make our teachers better? And how do we show the public that despite the recession, we're going to add value to your tuition dollars here? And that strategy worked. And now we're at almost 900 kids.
I want to throw you a quick curveball, and I want you to talk to business owners, because I think things can change in the economy quick. 2026 might be a really fun year for a lot of people, right? And things happen in the world and in the culture. A business without a mission. So at Mansfield Christian School, your mission is fairly clear. You've got the Bible. You can figure it out pretty quick. But there's a lot of businesses that don't have a mission. What would you say to a business owner that is going into 2026 without a well-stated mission?
Yeah, you better get one yesterday, because for you to be successful at all, your target audience better know who you are, what it is that you do, why it is that you do what you do, and how it benefits them, right? I mean, to talk about business marketing, and I'm out of my element, but I'm in my element, right? Mm-hmm. But I definitely believe, what's the problem that you solve for this customer, right? And you better be able to know that and speak it very, very clearly. For us, it's, boy, this parent and this family needs a great education, and they really want an education that aligns with their values. Well, we solve that problem for them. We come along and say, we can answer that for you. We'll be the guide. You're the hero, but we're the guide, and we can help you pick the right education for your child that lines up with your values. And so no matter what you are, what business is out there, you better be clear on what it is you're doing and why you're doing it, because like you said, 26 could be interesting. And if there's any confusion out there with the customer on who you are, what it is you do, and why you do it, which is big for Gen Z and millennials, the why part too, right? Because they're attracted to causes. So if there's nothing that you can say that speaks to them related to that element, you're going to struggle to survive.
So as we kind of wrap up, one more question I have for you, because for a business, customers come and customers go, and they keep on serving their mission. Now, for Mansfield Christian School or for Christian universities that are on mission, your customer changes. Your students start at 5 or 6 years old, and by the time you're saying goodbye, they're 17, 18 years old, and they've gone through a lot of shifts. How do you guard against mission drift as kids go through those tough middle school age, 10s and 12s and into 15 and 16? Parents want them to do what you wanted them to be and do, but they change. How do you keep everybody on purpose?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's why it probably, one answer to that, there's probably a couple different answers and variables here, but one definitely answer is that's why it's a package deal. This child just doesn't come alone. It's the family being admitted, right? Because we know we're not the home. We can't do your job as mom and dad, and you're going to have to do some things at home if we're going to be successful. And so your home needs to look like it needs to look when your child's 5, 6, 7 years old, and then also when they're 13, 14, and then also when they're 16, 17, and 18, because we know exactly to your point that the child's going to change for sure. But if mom and dad are with them, all the time, and they're also going to church, and the church is breathing into them as well, right? They're in a youth group, and they're growing at church also. Well, between the three of us then, we should be able to handle those changes. We should be able to come alongside and say, yep, life wasn't is not as clear now at 16, 17, 18 as it was when you were 6, 7, and 8. We get that. But we're prepared for it because we're your parents, we're your teachers, and we're your pastors. And between the three of us together, we're going to really help this child get to where they need to be. And that's why we really have to be a team there. And we do have a spiritual formation plan in place, like a lot of good Christian schools that say we kind of anticipate that. So we take you spiritually from those primary grades to intermediate grades to high school, giving you the spiritual things that you need at that age level. So we do have a plan in place for your spiritual growth so that you don't drift off mission as well. And that really helps us along the way. And it's way bigger than what I'm making it sound here. But we really have to be intentional about that. And we've given that some great thought. Well, good questions. Yeah, appreciate that. Well, thank you again for joining me today on the Clearly Christian podcast. And I trust that now you know more about what we can do as leaders to prevent mission drift and why it matters so much in a culture that's desperate for truth. If you like the show today, let us know by following along or subscribing. Hit the like button for me. That'll let others know the show is worth checking out. I certainly would appreciate that. Remember, the only way to turn things around in our country is to increase the number of people who hold a biblical worldview and then live that out. And the greatest hope to get there is Christian education. I'm Dr. Cy Smith. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Clearly Christian podcast with Dr. Cy Smith. Hear more episodes at clearlychristianeducation.com. If you'd like more information about Christian education in your neighborhood, or if you're interested in education opportunities at Mansfield Christian School, or if you agree with Dr. Smith and want to help him in his mission to influence and awaken Christian America, you can send Dr. Smith an email through the clearlychristianeducation.com website. Message him on the Clearly Christian LinkedIn or Facebook page, or call the Clearly Christian Connection line at 419-756-5651. This has been the Clearly Christian Podcast with Dr. Cy Smith on clearlychristianeducation.com, brought to you in conjunction with Mansfield Christian School, a Bryan Media production.